Hey everybody. Next week we are going to have a lesson on the regions of the United States in the early 1800s. But before we can focus on the lesson itself, we need to learn some of the important vocabulary for the lesson so that when we read it, we are able to understand what we are reading. And so when we talk about the United States and the regions in the early 1800s, we have to understand what exactly are regions. And a region is an area with common features that set it apart from other areas. An area with common features that set it apart from other areas. In a region, when you create regions, now they are not what we would call real, they are man-made. We are grouping places together based on what they have in common. And regions can be very small. They can be a few cities grouped together because of what they have in common. Cuyahoga Falls, Hudson, Stowe are all grouped together because they are around Akron, and it's the Akron region. They can be many states. They could be many countries. Okay, so regions, we're just grouping areas together based on what they have in common. So here's some examples. And we'll talk more about this example after winter break. But Ohio is grouped, has different regions. Areas in Ohio are grouped together based on their physical features, such as the glaciated Appalachian Plateau. This area is grouped together because it has this in common. Or the Lake Plain. This area is grouped together because it's by Lake Erie and it's flat land. So we can group areas together based on physical features. We can group, Ohio has different regions. Summit County, which most of us live in, is part of the northeast region of Ohio. It's grouped together based on common weather, common sports, and culture. Right? It's what they have in common. Ohio is part of the Midwest region in the United States. Ohio is grouped together with states like Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan and Indiana and Missouri and Nebraska, grouped together based on what they have in common again. And countries can be grouped together. Greenland, Canada, and the United States is grouped together in a region known as North America. Boundary. So what's a boundary? A boundary is a line that shows where one place ends and another begins. So it's a line, most of the time imaginary. Sometimes they use mountains or rivers as boundaries, but most of the time they're imaginary lines that shows where one place ends and another begins. So here's a map of Ohio. If you look at this map of Ohio, this line, this imaginary line right here, this is where Ohio ends and Pennsylvania begins. It's a boundary. Right here, this line. This is where Ohio ends and West Virginia begins. And you can say the same thing about Kentucky, Indiana, or Michigan. Some of us might live in a neighborhood where we have fences, and fences from our house to the neighbor's house. That could also be a boundary, right? It's where your house ends and your neighbor's house begins. So boundary, a line, again, a line where one place ends and another place begins. Our next vocabulary word is agriculture. Agriculture is the business of growing crops and raising animals. So it's the actual business of growing crops such as corn, wheat, pumpkins, beans, squash, asparagus, broccoli, carrots, apples, grapes, right? And raising animals. Farm animals are called livestock. Pigs, chickens, goats, sheep, cows. All right, so agriculture is the business of growing crops and raising animals. Plantation. Raise your hand if you have heard of a plantation. Anybody? Maybe if you visited a southern state like Virginia or North or South Carolina or Georgia, you and your family might have visited a plantation. They were very popular in the South in the United States in the 1800s. So when we talk about regions, we're going to talk about how plantations were popular in the southern region in the 1800s. A plantation is a large farm where crops such as tobacco, sugar, and cotton are grown. So they're the very large farms. And here's a diagram of what a typical plantation, a southern plantation, would look like. You would have a large house where the owner would live. You would have different buildings for like the flour mill, maybe a church, a stable where the horses are kept, a carpenter where they build things. You'd also, unfortunately, in the South, slavery was very popular because there was a lot of farm work to do and they used slaves. So you would have an area for the slaves to stay, and of course you would have large fields where they could grow different kinds of crops such as tobacco, sugar, and cotton. Cotton and tobacco were very popular in the South in the United States, in the southern states. Okay, so when we talk about the U.S. regions, we're going to talk about how the South had plantations, and they also had the largest number of slaves, enslaved people. Our next vocabulary is natural resources. And you may have learned about natural resources in science. Natural resources is something found in nature that people can use. Can you think of an example of a natural resource, something found in nature that people can use? Here are some examples: air, water, soil, trees, wildlife, coal, petroleum, which is like the gas we use for cars, natural gas we use to heat our houses, minerals like gold, diamond, silver, salt. These are things that we find in nature, right? And we use it. Think about trees. We use it to build houses. We use it to start fires. We use it for paper, right? We're using these things from nature for our everyday life. Can you think of a way that you use natural resources in your everyday life? Something from nature? Our next vocabulary is physical environment. And a place's physical environment, it's the part of the environment that includes physical features such as soil, climate, and bodies of water. So the physical feature, what landforms, what physical features, what's the soil like? What's the climate like? What's the weather? The typical weather. Is it hot in the summers, cold in the winters? Bodies of water. So the physical environment of Ohio, you could say, especially by Akron, right? It's hot and humid in the summers. It's cold and snowy in the winters. We are near Lake Erie. We also have different rivers. Our soil is good for, some soil is good for farming. There's hills, right? We're talking about the physical environment, the physical features of a place. Next, we talk about industry. And industry means all of the businesses that make one kind of product or provide one kind of service. Remember, a product is a good. This highlighter is a product. My wallet is a product. My mouse is a product. A service is something people do. A haircut, a doctor office, a teacher is a service. A mechanic who works on cars is a service. So an industry is all the businesses of one kind of product are ones that provide one kind of service. So here's some examples. Fast food industry. Burger King, KFC, Arby's, Pizza Hut, McDonald's, Wendy's, Dairy Queen, Popeyes, Chipotle, Subway, right, are part of the fast food industry. They have one kind of service. Businesses in the car industry, right, they have one type of product. Ford, Kia, Honda, Mercedes, Toyota, Chevrolet, all right, Jaguar, Bentley, all right, all type of one product. All right, and again, businesses that have one type of product: gasoline, BP, Circle K, Sunoco, Shell, Marathon. All right, again, industry is all the businesses that make one kind of product or provide one kind of service. So we have like the fast food industry, the shoe industry, the video game industry, the sports industry, the entertainment industry, all right? All businesses with one type of either product or service. And our last vocabulary is all about the money, 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 money. The way an economy is the way a country produces and uses natural resources, goods, and services. We're going to talk a lot about economy and economics when we get to March and April. But an economy is, again, the way a country produces and uses its natural resources, its goods, its services. An example would be if a country has a lot of trees, they might produce a lot of paper because they have a lot of trees. If a country has a lot of colleges, for example, they might produce a lot of technology. And they might trade with other countries. If the United States has a lot of, making a lot of cars, Canada might buy them because they don't make a lot of cars. And if Canada makes a lot of paper, the United States might buy paper from Canada. All right, so economy, again, the way a country produces and uses natural resources, goods, and services. So here's the 8 vocabulary words for next week's lesson on the regions of the United States in the early 1800s. I hope you were able to understand as I went through each of these. Now you can move on to your anticipation guide. Do the before reading column. Read the statement. Tell me if you think it's true or false, so we are all prepared for next week.